Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video, and thank you for your trust. Everything I create is only speculation and personal opinion. No one could have guessed that the moment Eva's heart softened the most would also be the first moment that drew her closer to a truth capable of destroying her entire world. Fairmont Crest had always been a place defined by polished smiles, gestures of kindness staged like moral triumphs, and people who knew exactly how to turn decency into a flawless public performance. But this time, at the grand opening of Leslie's free clinic, something reached Eva in a different way. It was no longer the familiar instinct of suspicion, no longer the silent wall of self-protection she had always kept between herself and her mother, but a rare emotion, almost painful in its intensity. For the first time, Eva did not see Leslie as a woman constantly calculating every move, nor as a mother who knew how to make others feel indebted and guilty, but as a woman who was finally being seen, finally being acknowledged, finally standing in the light without having to fight for it through open manipulation. People from the neighborhood stepped inside, thanking her, praising her, congratulating her. Poor mothers were given medicine, elderly residents had their health checked, and grateful eyes rested on Leslie as though she had become a symbol of salvation. And in that rare moment, Eva wanted to believe. She wanted to believe that all the years of emotional caution inside her might have been wrong. She wanted to believe that beneath all the thorns, her mother had truly preserved enough humanity to do something good without demanding anything in return. She wanted to believe that this time, Leslie was not playing a role. That was exactly why the emotional collapse that followed became so horrifying. Because the breakdown did not begin with some huge secret, but with a few details too small for anyone else to notice. A file placed slightly crooked in the administrative cabinet, its medical record number not matching the registration list. A shipment of medical supplies delivered far too late, when the clinic should already have been closed. A strange man with no medical uniform, no name on the list of sponsors or staff, yet able to move in and out of the storage area as if it belonged to him. A container labeled as testing equipment, but far heavier than the paperwork claimed it should be. And strangest of all was Leslie's reaction whenever Eva casually brushed against questions that should have been harmless. Leslie did not become angry in the ordinary way. She tightened like a wire pulled too far, her eyes flashing with something sharp and guarded, almost cruel, as though every question from Eva was not curiosity at all, but a knife cutting straight into the carefully constructed disguise she had been wearing all this time. At first, Eva tried to convince herself that she was overthinking. Maybe the records were only administrative errors. Maybe the unfamiliar man was a temporary outside contractor. Maybe her mother was tense because of the pressure of opening day. Because she had poured too much effort into creating something good and was terrified it might be ruined by even the smallest mistake. But Eva's instincts refused to stay silent. They did not come from baseless paranoia, but from years of living beside Leslie and watching the way she built different versions of herself depending on who stood in front of her. Eva understood that the most dangerous thing about Leslie was not obvious lies, but her ability to blend truth and falsehood so perfectly that they could no longer be separated. There had always been a genuine streak of kindness in her, but it usually appeared only at the exact right time, in the exact right place, for the exact right purpose. And when Eva realized that the gratitude and pride rising in her as a daughter had slowed her down even for half a beat in the face of those disturbing signs, she felt a chill run through her. The terrifying thing was not only the possibility that Leslie was guilty. What was even more frightening was that Eva had unintentionally become Leslie's most perfect shield simply by standing there, smiling, trusting, and allowing everyone to see that Leslie had finally been recognized by her own daughter. From that moment on, the grand opening was no longer a beautiful milestone. It became a psychological battlefield. Eva began paying attention to the way Leslie seemed overly concerned with the exact timing of the clinic's opening, as though everything had to happen at this precise moment, not a minute earlier. Not a minute later. She pushed the staff to finish every procedure with a strange kind of obsession. She was willing to lose her temper over a tiny change in the delivery schedule. She wanted all the major sponsors present, wanted the local press covering the story, wanted the neighborhood to see her standing at the center of collective gratitude. At first glance, that ambition could have looked like nothing more than a hunger for prestige. But Eva began to sense something deeper than that. Leslie did not simply want admiration. She needed the clinic to begin operating at exactly the right time, as though some invisible machine behind the scenes depended on that moment. And when Eva started linking all the scattered details together, a terrifying possibility emerged. The free clinic was not merely a place of healing. It might be a transfer point, a hiding place, a way to legitimize something that should never exist in the light. The shadow of the plasma case returned to Eva's mind like an old fever that had never truly gone away. The rumors, the connections severed halfway through, the names whispered in the dark and then erased the moment anyone got too close. If Leslie truly was part of the plasma ring, then the clinic was almost the perfect cover. A humanitarian medical facility had every reason to receive supplies, store blood, plasma, medicine, patient data, and scientific shipments without attracting suspicion. It was a place where the community's sympathy would automatically become a shield. A place that grew harder to question the more it was praised. Eva was horrified to realize that kindness, or at least the image of kindness, could be the most sophisticated tool of deception in the entire neighborhood. And what nearly suffocated her was the fact that this theory did not feel far-fetched at all. It felt logical in the cruelest possible way. As Eva quietly began looking deeper, she uncovered a truth even more painful than all her original suspicions. Leslie was not indifferent to her. On the contrary, in many moments she looked at Eva with a love so intense it seemed almost desperate, like a mother wanting to give her daughter everything she herself had never had. But that was exactly what made the entire situation feel so vicious. If Leslie had been completely cold, Eva could have cut ties more easily. If Leslie had only been using her without loving her, Eva would have felt nothing but rage. Instead, every sign suggested that Leslie might sincerely love her daughter, sincerely want to protect her, sincerely feel proud to have Eva standing beside her on the day the clinic was publicly celebrated. And yet at the very same time, she could still use Eva as the most credible cover imaginable, use her presence to legitimize her own reputation, use her daughter's love to silence any doubts that might arise in others. That truth left Eva unable to decide which was more painful, knowing that Leslie had lied, or knowing that Leslie loved her and still pulled her into a system of deception without ever giving her a choice. In the days that followed, Eva lived as though she had been split in two. One part of her still wanted to save her mother, to find a reason large enough to justify everything, to believe Leslie had been forced, threatened, controlled by someone else behind the curtain. Because if there truly was a larger power manipulating events, if someone had turned the clinic into one link in the plasma chain of crimes, then Leslie might still have a chance to be seen as a victim. But another part of Eva could see too many signs of active choice. Leslie enjoyed the attention. Leslie controlled the story too tightly. Leslie did not behave like a woman being cornered, but like someone trying to keep her perfect design from cracking. She liked being thanked by the community, being called a savior, being looked at with the respect she had probably spent her whole life craving. Maybe she had entered this for desperate reasons at first, because of coercion, because of a debt she could not escape. But the deeper she went, the more intoxicating the power of being trusted may have become. And once someone grows accustomed to turning goodness into a tool of control, stopping becomes almost impossible. What truly terrified Eva was not some enormous piece of evidence, but a tiny mistake no one else would have caught. In one set of shipping documents used to compare against sponsorship invoices, there was a repeated symbol on 3 entirely different shipments. A subcode that did not belong to the clinic's standard system, but had vaguely surfaced before in information tied to the plasma operation. An ordinary person would have ignored it because it was just a few small characters in the lower corner of a page. But Eva saw it. And in that instant, all the vague suspicions inside her suddenly took on a clear and undeniable shape. She understood why Leslie had needed the clinic to open at exactly this time. She understood why certain storage areas were always restricted under the excuse of medical safety. She understood why strange men appeared and vanished in silence. She understood that if she kept digging deeper, there would be no turning back. Because once the truth opened itself fully, it would not only bury Leslie. It could drown Eva too, the daughter who had signed a few volunteer confirmations, helped verify a few records, stood before the public as a living witness to the clinic's supposed integrity. If everything came crashing down, who would believe she had been completely innocent? That fear began to turn Eva into someone else. She grew more irritable, colder, quicker to explode when people tried to check on her. She no longer knew where care ended and investigation began. Every compliment directed at Leslie now rang in her ears like mockery. Every patient who was genuinely helped made her ache even more, because it made everything messier. If the clinic had been entirely fake, destroying it would have been easier. But here, good and evil were wrapped around each other so tightly they could not be separated. Real people were being treated, real suffering was being eased. Which meant that if Eva tore everything down, she would not only expose guilt, she would also destroy a place that was giving hope to the vulnerable. But if she stayed silent, she would become an accomplice to a system that might be moving plasma, money, power, and crime beneath the mask of humanitarian work. Never had the choice between protecting and betraying felt so unbearable, because either path required her to become the one spilling the blood of some part of herself. Leslie sensed that change in Eva quickly. Eva did not need to confess anything. Leslie understood that her daughter had smelled something dangerous in the air. From then on, the war between them no longer needed words. It unfolded in glances held for too long, in sentences that leaned too heavily on loyalty, in gestures of care carrying undertones of control. Leslie began tightening her hold on Eva with a kind of affection that felt suffocating. She became more attentive, more protective, more present, as though trying to pull Eva back into the role of the grateful and loyal daughter. But the more Eva was wrapped in that delayed tenderness, the more frightened she became. Because now she could no longer tell where real love ended and strategy began. Leslie might have been trying to shield her daughter from danger outside. Or she might have been trapping her inside an emotional circle where Eva would never be able to expose her mother without tearing apart the last human piece of herself. The closer Eva came to the truth, the more she understood that this was no longer just a story about a clinic or about a mother. It was a war over control of memory, over who had the right to define love, over the price of loyalty in a world where goodness itself could be used as camouflage for evil. If Leslie had entered the plasma ring because she was forced, Eva might still save her from the people behind it. But if Leslie had stepped into it willingly, if she had deliberately used the clinic to blind everyone around her, then the one who needed saving was no longer Leslie. It was Eva, from the psychological grip of the mother she had spent her entire life both loving and fearing. And the greatest tragedy of all was that even after understanding this, Eva still could not stop hurting at the thought that she might be the one to push her own mother over the edge. In the end, what made Eva grow was not whether she discovered her mother was guilty or innocent, but the moment she was forced to admit that love does not erase consequences, and gratitude cannot replace the truth. She began to understand that the way she let her guard down on opening day was not stupidity, but a deeply human desire to believe that someone she loved was still capable of goodness. But that very desire had turned her into the most vulnerable link in Leslie's game. The free clinic, which should have been a symbol of healing, had become an ethical maze where every open door led to betrayal. If Eva kept walking forward, she might save herself, but destroy her mother. If she turned back, she might keep her mother, but lose the last of her conscience. And perhaps that was the cruelest conspiracy in this entire story. Not plasma, not money, not power, but the way it transformed a daughter into someone forced to choose between blood and truth. Between love and self-preservation. Between protecting the woman who gave her life and accepting that sometimes destroying everything is the only way to stop evil disguised as kindness. What exactly did Eva see inside that clinic that left her frozen in shock? Why did Leslie panic when Eva walked in at that exact moment? Who is really standing behind the clinic project? Is the clinic saving lives or hiding a dangerous criminal network?